following Answers for Elders podcast features author, innovator, Alzheimer's and dementia family coach, Faith Marshall. And welcome back, everyone, to Answers for Elders Radio Network, podcast network, now heard on all your major podcast platforms. Here we go. And also on Answers for Elders and seniorresource.com. We also have a national radio show in 24 different cities across the USA. And we're very excited today to have Faith Marshall, who is a dementia family coach. She works with families that in different aspects as they're navigating a very complicated world of dementia and Alzheimer's. And Faith has her own story with her own parents. And certainly we're talking about a very, very important topic this hour, and that is senior elder scams. It's very sad we have to have this conversation because it's very overwhelming, and yet it happens every single day. I hear of it constantly, as you can imagine, in my world. So Faith, tell us a little bit. I know you shared a little bit of story about your parents. Again, they were very trusting. Do you have any, what are ways in which families can help protect their loved ones?
I think the first step is getting our seniors to be open with their families. And mom and dad tried to hide things when they thought they did something wrong. So we have to be proactive as a family member and be a little bit snoopy. Working with the banks, we're very helpful to monitor, have online banking. I mean, my parents had no knowledge of online banking, or passwords or any of that, but we set it up so that it went to my brother and he would just monitor it and see what was going on, so that if there was a charge, he had a chance to stop it. In terms of cash flow, he managed the cash flow by minimizing what was attached to the debit card. And then neighbors are a big help. When neighbors see contractors showing up or different things that might look suspicious, they were great at sending us an email or even a phone call. So it takes a network to help protect them.
Sure.
They don't know they're vulnerable. And that's where really knowing the neighbors surrounding our loved ones is very helpful when they're independently living.
Right.
And you've got staff in the various assisted living in different homes that can help assist with that too.
Well, and I think, Faith, what you're saying is yes, we have to be watchdogs, but there's also some things that we could do. I know with my mother, she had one debit card for all of her accounts, for her big major checking account. And there was like $75,000 in there at one time, so we can ask the bank. And this is something that I think is very valuable in many ways, to set up a separate bank account that only has a limit of so much funds in it. And the main reason why we can do that is not only to protect your loved one against fraud, but let's say you have a family caregiver that you want them to go buy groceries for you. Maybe you have different things like that they need to fill your car up with gas. So, you can give them that card, and that helps you put a small limit on it. So that's the card that they hang on to, right. And then give the major bank account card to that loved one. Then it's just easy. It's not like it's a big deal. And it's certainly, there's certain times when as a family caregiver, if you want to transfer more money to that bank account, to that card on a situation, they can call you and say, Mom, if you need something else, I'll go ahead and transfer the funds over. The nice thing about that is it's still giving them their dignity, their autonomy, having their own debit card, but it's also giving them the opportunity to say, we're just going to safeguard this. I'm going to monitor this for you, but you just let me know if you need more money. And that's a way to honor, to provide dignity. And I think that's one of the things that I encourage families to do.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we did with mom and dad. And
awesome.
And you can have a separate card for 2 cards for an account, so that your caregiver has their own card as well, or just a duplicate card in the same name. And then we partnered with the bank. Every bank is different. So we alerted the bank to make notes on the account of alerting family if there was a large withdrawal. Unfortunately, we didn't do that until after the second time it happened.
Wow.
And
So it did happen to you a second time.
yeah, so about 6 months after the QFC brake fluid incident, somebody came and knocked on the door right after Dad left to go for a walk, and told, they knew the name, so they told Mom, Walt wants us to fix the roof. Is he here? Well, they knew he wasn't, and so then she told them he wasn't there, and wound up getting in the car with them and going with them up to the bank again to get, this time, to get $2,500.
Oh
And
my goodness.
and she, after the fact, she said she realized at some point it was very similar. She was in the early stages of
Mhm.
dementia, and she was scared, but she was afraid of what would happen if she didn't follow through. So she didn't understand why they didn't come into the bank with her. Well, it's all the security cameras. And they waited in the car, and she talked about his daughter sitting in the back seat reading a Bible. So she felt very comfortable with them, and came back to the house, and the guy took a 2x4 and shoved it up through the covered porch to show her that it was rotten and it needed to be fixed, and created that sense of need. And then when the police report was filed and the police came, they're the ones who alerted us to the fact that there is a whole network. It was not the same people, totally different people, different faces for her. And you don't get the money back. They just, it's like any
Yeah.
other theft, they go looking for them. So after that point, Mom was a lot more receptive to having our help with the finances and changing the bank account and adding signers. So I was a signer for one of her accounts, as my brother was a signer for another account.
Mhm.
So when the bank called, we could put a stop on something
Yeah.
that was happening.
And just as an FYI, we work with many attorneys here on Answers for Elders. If you are a signer on your parents' bank account, make sure that you have a power of attorney authorization. If you do not, you are partially liable for anything that could happen. And that's a whole other story that we could get into with an attorney. But we have several stories of, oh yeah, I'm just a signer on my parents' bank account. But in one case, we had a gentleman that was driving and shouldn't have been driving, hit someone in a crosswalk, and he was in the hospital. And not only did the older gentleman get sued, but so did the son, because he was a signer on the bank account. So
Wow.
make sure that you have an active power of attorney if you are on a checking account,
Yeah.
because you
And
can
we
be
did.
financially liable.
Yeah, we did, but I didn't realize that would be tied to,
Yes, it
yeah,
is.
the legal side of it as well.
Yes. So that's
Yeah.
a whole other story. So make sure when we start talking about that, I want to make sure that everybody knows that don't be a signer on accounts unless you have
You
documentation
definitely
that
have
you're
to dot all your
acting.
I's and cross all your T's in this world.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, Faith. So now getting into how people operate. Again, we're talking networks. This is no longer, individuals. And certainly we have individuals, and we can talk about that till the cows come home, of how, older men can be victimized by
Yeah.
young women that come in to be a caregiver, and all of a sudden they're turning over their bank account.
Yeah.
All of these things that are happening. It seems to me, Faith, like they prey on people who are lonely, in many cases, or vulnerable. If your loved one is lonely or vulnerable, they are prime targets, especially in the fact if they're craving company. You don't necessarily know. The other thing that I'm really, really adamant about is don't hire a caregiver to take care of someone off of Craigslist or site. Make sure you hire a reputable home care agency that is licensed, bonded, and insured. Don't do this independent thing. Even though they go on some of these sites like that are, I'm not going to mention the name, but I'm going to be a caregiver and I'm going to sign up on this website, and I'm just, yes, you could be background checked, but your intent could be new to hurt someone. Make sure that they are licensed, bonded, and insured. Make sure that they have the credentials and the background and references. You just want to make sure that your loved ones are protected.
And too many times, as you mentioned, the seniors are very trusting. And if they like the person, and those
Yep.
scam artists are really good at being liked,
Yep.
they like the person, if they're only going to charge them $10 an hour instead of 20,
Mhm.
I mean, they know how to work it.
Yes,
And
they do. Yes, they do.
it also brings up the mindset of jewelry and what jewelry you're wearing.
Mhm.
Another situation that I just became aware of was a woman had her favorite diamond ring on, went to the grocery store, and people were circling the parking lot and held her up at gunpoint to steal her ring.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so being mindful, turning that diamond inside so it just looks like a plain gold band. And it's like you said, we don't want to project that fear,
Right.
but we do have to be cautious and not be flashy.
Mhm.
Shop with a friend, go with a neighbor.
Mhm.
Just, be mindful about your surroundings and who's
Yes.
around you,
Yes.
and paying attention to who's watching you, who's following you, the cars, all of
Yeah.
that. Like we learn
Yeah.
on the crime shows, but it's really sad because like you said, they're lonely, somebody's going to strike up a conversation with them.
Correct.
Yeah.
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 And I also just reminding everyone, just be mindful. We're going to definitely give this number out again for anybody. If you realize that you've been maybe taken advantage of, there are things you can do. Number one, if you purchase something with a credit card, you probably can file a claim with your bank, and your bank can usually refund money if it's a regular business or something like that. Never give somebody cash. Never, never, never. If they are a reputable business, they will be able to take a card, and that's important.
Yep.
And our AARP Fraud Watch Network helpline is 877-908-3360. And Faith, you can be reached at what email address?
At email would be faith@faithmarshall.com, and phone number 855-36-FAITH.
Wonderful. And Faith and I will be right back right after this. We would like to thank you for joining us in this podcast. Faith is here to support you and your family on this journey. She will help you to come together in harmony, creating the best team in advocating for your loved one's care. So call Faith at 855-363-2484 to receive a $200 gift card just by mentioning that you've heard these podcasts. Again, that number is 855-363-2484. And guess what? That spells Faith, 855-3 FAITH.